In this video, I'd like to show you how to create a sketch of a trendy coffee shop that demonstrates the sense of scale, materiality, and the color palette without investing a ton of time into 3D rendering. Hi guys, my name is Alex, I'm an architect in London, and on this channel we explore different design and drawing workflows. And this particular project was born out of the love for coffee, which is one of my favorite beverages. I also enjoy the general vibe of the coffee shops because these spaces are usually cozy with interesting material palettes, and they create a great working environment as well. So I've started with this messy sketch here, and it doesn't look really nice at the moment, but bear with me on that. It was done for the time-saving purposes. And over here I have the concept diagram of the room. Here I have the bigger picture of the sketch of the space and some, descriptions and the detailed plantation drawing. And the focus here is on variety of spaces. So we have this double height space, which is the focal point of the composition. And then we have smaller spaces like the mezzanine space above and below mezzanine space. I wanted to introduce the variety of colors and materiality and textures in this composition. So the next step was to photograph this picture and import it in Photoshop for a quick materiality and color study. I think some coffee shops go a bit chaotic in terms of their materials. So whilst I wanted to make a variety of textures and colors, I wanted to keep it also simple and aligned. So I wanted a bit more deliberate subdivision of spaces using pulling and pushing method. So you can see here how basically all our volumetrical arrangement is kind of aligned, and there's even a contrasting space which is the servery behind. So the next step was to import the image into Procreate and crop it to fit the iPad proportions. Next I reduced the opacity of the underlay, created an overlay layer, and started the first pass. So the purpose of this next step was just to trace the composition, starting with the main features and not worrying about the textures at the moment. I'll get to lamps and all these details later on. The main thing is to get the main objects correctly, so the beams and the things like corners and the main components that make up the space. So I could have used the drawing assist, but I thought that this is going to make the drawing look a bit more sketchy and also forgiving if I miss something or something doesn't look quite right. Because having a drawing that's kind of sketchy, it gives a bit more tolerance for mistakes. I'm saving time by drawing more intricate details in the Procreate directly because it would have taken a bit more time to do them in SketchUp. I'm not worried about all the sizes being kind of super accurate because the sketch is kind of more forgiving than the actual 3D model, which does have to be accurate. I'm using kind of a thickish pen to not get bogged down by the details. Now it's also a good time to add entourage because that will help me to mask the areas that I don't need to focus when I'm tracing the drawing. You can see when the line is getting too big for my hand kind of to handle it, I just make a break in between them. So yeah, I added these two cushions at the front of the window, and I might also add another person here in this view. And also a member of staff at the back, kind of working away. And I also add details like a till and the coffee machine at the back. I like to trace the objects that are kind of the same at the same time so that I don't lose the sense of kind of unity and uniformity about them. So like these chairs, for example, and the same maybe with the lamps above. Okay, now that the first pass is done, it's time to add some textures to it. So I'll use a very simple palette of basically tiles, timber, and plasterboard. In fact, before I'll do that, I'll just add a little detail here. I think these tiles, the way they're subdivided, they're a bit too small for my liking, so I'll cheat and I'll increase the spacing between them. So they're currently shown as 100 by 100, but I'll go with 200 so that my line density is kind of in check, and also that the back area doesn't draw too much attention. Unfortunately, I don't have the guidelines under the mezzanine, so I'll just have to freestyle for these floorboards underneath. Hopefully they're gonna come out okay. So I kind of used a little bit of artistic license here to make, I guess, like a highlight with the use of lines. With these floorboards it can get a bit busy, so what I'm doing is I'm just trying to trace the path of each of these floorboards under the chairs and things, and I'm doing the same trick as I did on the wall where there's a highlight kind of in the middle. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with this. Let's turn off the background layer and start adding colors. So for coloring, I'm going to use a marker that I actually got from Henry Gao, and you can check his channel out, but he has really good pen selection and I particularly enjoyed the marker that he has. So I'll be using that for the coloring of the scene. And I'm just highlighting some of the floorboards just to make the texture a bit more vibrant. I'm using the same color on the floor, ceiling and the wall, but slightly different shade. Similarly, I'm just going to pick out some of the boards just to give a bit of a texture to this. And I'll have my countertop in a matching color to the lamps at the ceiling level. I think red will act as a nice accent in this composition. I'll use kind of grayish color for the tiles because, first of all, pure white doesn't really exist, and it will also help to kind of introduce the hierarchy of what's coming to the foreground and what's at the back. Okay, so this is the kind of final stretch of this coloring in exercise, is just adding more colors to the objects that we have in the scene. Kind of trying to go with the warm palette, but give these objects kind of their own colors and their own kind of unique styles and properties. So what I like to do with colors, if I have a color that I'd like to use for accent, I don't just put it in one place. I kind of try to distribute it across kind of multiple areas so that it kind of saves the time, but it also makes the composition interesting and more harmonious in terms of like the color selection. Okay, so now that we have the colors established, time to add some shadow. So I'll go with the black color and I'll lower the opacity, adjust the size, and I'll start with the mezzanine. I'll add some contact shadows to the floor as well, so that this board in the front kind of pops closer to the viewer's eye. And then I'll add the shadow here in this area too. And lastly, kind of the subtle shadow at the ceiling level. Just drop the opacity of the textures slightly. This is completely without textures and this is about 70%. I don't know if that makes much difference, but I like to reduce them a little bit. And then finally I'll add the highlights as well. Maybe also add the cafe name above the servery onto the wall. So I'm still trying to narrow down the niche of this channel, and so if you enjoy the drawing tutorials like these, then let me know in the comments and I'll make more of these sort of videos. If you like this video, then you might also like this other video that I made on how to draw an urban context, and it's all about the placement of the building, the general vibe, and not over sweating about the details. So check that video out and I'll see you on the other side.